Last time, we identified one of the main ways in which our linguistic usage can differ from common standard linguistic usage. We observed that we can use words to mean, refer to, and describe things other than what they are commonly or usually used to mean, refer to, or describe. The traditional term for this kind of unusual usage is tropological usage, or trope. And this tropological usage features in poetry and literature at large in Western tradition from the earliest stages on. We also observe that there are several different types of this kind of unusual usage. There are several different tropes. And we distinguished between them by observing the relationship that exists between what words are usually used to mean and what they are being used to mean. So, for example, if we use words to mean or refer to something that resembles what they are usually used to mean, and we do not use the words like or as, we have metaphor. If we do use the words like or as to assert the resemblance, then we have simile. Those two are usually sort of lumped in together as a single trope because both are asserting an observation of resemblance. If we use words that are usually used to mean a part of the thing in order to refer to the whole of which that part is a part, then we have synecdoche. If we use words to mean something that is contiguous in space or time to what they are usually used to mean, then we have metonymy. If we use words to mean the opposite of what they are usually used to mean, we have irony. If we use words to mean or describe something smaller than what they are usually used to mean or describe, we have hyperbole. And if we use words to mean or describe something greater than what they are usually used to mean or describe, we have meiosis, or understatement. Now, there are several other tropes, but I think these are the most important ones. These 6 are the most important ones, at least in relation to studying poetry and literature. Also, in some cases, I want to note that a single expression can qualify as more than one trope. Some hyperboles, for example, are also metaphors. And let me just note that there is a quiz as a separate lesson in this class. If you want to get a bit of practice in identifying different tropes in poetic texts, please have a look at the quiz that is included as a separate lesson in this class. Now, in this session, I'd like to provide an example of how we can use these terms in order to describe, understand, and enjoy poetry by using them in connection with the Wordsworth poem, in which the usage is highly tropological. I'm not going to try to describe all of the tropological usage in the poem, but just some of the instances of it, which I think are the most important ones. We see, first of all, that there are similes. There are 2 similes in the poem. That is to say, Wordsworth uses the words like or as to assert a resemblance between things. The first simile occurs right at the beginning of the poem. The poem begins with a simile. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. Now, what does this simile do for the poem? How does it affect us when we read the poem? Well, I want to think about this by considering other possibilities. There was a story, which may well be false or untrue, that Wordsworth originally had I wandered lonely as a cow, and that his sister Dorothy told him he had to change it to cloud. If he had cow, I wandered lonely as a cow, how would that work? I don't have anything against cows. I like cows. Haven't done me any harm, provided me with milk, butter, cheese. Cows are great. But I am glad that instead of cow, we have cloud in this poem. Because a cloud can be, just think about what a cloud is, that to which Wordsworth is comparing himself when he says, I wandered lonely as a cloud. A cloud can be high up in the air, as Wordsworth observes in the poem, not earthbound as cows are. Cloud is light, airy, whereas a cow is heavy. A cloud is ethereal, almost immaterial, whereas a cow is dense flesh and bone and blood. A cloud can float, as Wordsworth observes in the poem, and be moved merely by the breeze, whereas it's difficult to move a cow that way. A cloud can move across the entire sky, whereas cows are usually more limited in their movement, usually often fenced in and often stay pretty much in one place. And a cloud can be all alone in the vast sky, whereas cows, well, I guess they could be alone in a field, but they're often in herds. Now, because clouds have all these features, when Wordsworth compares himself to a cloud, I think he represents himself in a certain way on that occasion he saw the flowers. The simile makes it seem he was not willful and intent, striving to achieve something, but gentle and passive. He was free to move, but subject and sensitive to external influences, content to float and be moved by external influences, wistful, a little lonely, as he says he is, a little melancholic perhaps. So I think the simile gives us a strong sense. It goes to Wordsworth's representation of himself. Right? The simile gives us a strong sense of how Wordsworth was feeling on that occasion when he saw the flowers, especially because the simile is asserted with words that display the assonance on long vowels and diphthongs that we noted earlier. Now, the effect on us, I think, can be diverse, but I do think it's one of the things, this simile, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. It's one of the things that makes it soothing and comforting. I find the simile soothes me and comforts me in the way that Wordsworth represents himself. And I don't think I would feel the same way had Wordsworth begun the poem with, "I wandered lonely as a cow." Now, the second simile comes at the beginning of the second stanza. That entire stanza, by the way, was added to the original version of the poem, which only had 3 stanzas. Wordsworth added the second stanza that also begins with a simile. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. Here, Wordsworth asserts a similarity or resemblance to describe not himself, but the flowers. The flowers were as continuous and extensive as the stars that shine and twinkle on the galaxy, which we call the Milky Way. And that contains a galaxy that contains billions of stars and planets, including the Earth and the Sun. Now, even though the simile describes the flowers, I think it also goes to my sense of Wordsworth's feelings and mood. But in this case, the simile, I feel the simile expresses like the mood, Wordsworth's feelings change, or they changed on the occasion when he saw the flowers. In this case, the simile expresses his enthusiasm, his excitement, his wonder and amazement in seeing such a large number of flowers covering such a large expanse of ground along the shores of a lake. It's as though he's saying, "Oh, you should have seen the flowers. There were so many. There were thousands. There were thousands. As far as the eye could see, they were like all the stars in a galaxy." So the simile again goes to a representation of Wordsworth's feelings, but in this case, the feelings of excitement and enthusiasm. And how does that affect us? Well, one of the things I feel is just surprise. It's a little surprising, a little startling, this comparison of flowers to the vast expanse of stars in our galaxy. I mean, the poem begins by describing an experience of seeing flowers beside a lake, but then suddenly you get this description of them in terms of a vast galaxy of stars that shine and twinkle. So there's a pleasure of surprise, which can be enlivening, on offer here in these lines. And also perhaps the pleasure of seeing something in a way I hadn't seen them before, seeing a new resemblance, seeing the flowers as being like a galaxy of billions of stars. Also, in discussions of tropes from ancient Greece and Rome onwards, up through the Renaissance, well into the Renaissance and beyond, it's a commonplace that metaphor and simile in poetry and oratory make descriptions graphic and vivid. And so they affect readers in a particular way. They make us see what is being described. They put the scene or event before our eyes. They give us a strong image of what is being described. We saw earlier that at least some readers have said that Wordsworth's poetry does indeed affect them in this way. It gives them pictures of various scenes, makes them see the scene that's being described. And I think that these similes in the poem are another thing that at least have a certain potential to make us see the scene that Wordsworth is describing. So much for the two similes in the poem. Now, there are many instances of another kind of unusual linguistic usage in this poem, a kind of unusual linguistic usage that is closely related to simile. In order to describe and understand it, let me ask you, what are you usually talking about when you use these words? A crowd, a host, a company. Well, according to dictionaries, if you look up these words in dictionaries, such as the Shorter Oxford English Dictionary, it turns out that, well, in standard common usage, right, those words are usually used to refer to groups of people, a number of people crowded, gathered together. For crowd, for example, a host. Sometimes hosts just use as a large to mean a large number of something, but it too is often used to describe large numbers of people, and company is often used to also to refer to a body of people, a body of soldiers. And let me ask you what you usually use these verbs to describe: dances, dancing, outdoing in glee, to dance, danced, tossing heads. Again, I think most Anglophones now use these words to describe or refer to actions that people perform, often to music. Those words, dance and dancing, commonly used to refer to actions that are performed by people to music. But what does Wordsworth use these terms to refer to and describe in this poem? Well, mainly the flowers. He's usually talking about the flowers when he uses these terms. We can see this that he does this throughout the poem. He saw a crowd, a host of daffodils. The flowers were dancing in the breeze. The flowers were tossing their heads in sprightly dance. They outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet must have been gay in such a jocund company of flowers. He also uses the word on occasion to describe the waves. The waves danced along the flowers. So, Wordsworth is using words which are usually used to refer to or describe large groups of people and people moving to music and enjoying themselves in order to talk about something else, flowers and waves. And that means we have a tropological description of the flowers. What trope is it? That depends on the relationship, as you know, between the flowers moving in the breeze and people who dance and toss their heads. What is the relationship between a large number of flowers moving in the breeze and a large number of people who are dancing? Could the flowers be part of the people? I don't think so. So it's not a synecdoche. Could the flowers be the opposite of people? I guess it's possible to see the world in that way. but I think it would be strange to do so. So it's not irony. Could the flowers be similar to people? Do they resemble the people dancing? Well, I think yes, it is reasonable to see the world in that way. For there are large numbers of flowers, the ones that Wordsworth is seeing, and there are large numbers of people in crowds, hosts, and companies. Flowers move, and people who dance move. Flowers move to something external to them, the breeze, and people who are dancing move to something external to them, namely music. So Wordsworth is using words throughout the poem, which are usually used to refer to and describe one thing in order to refer to and describe something that resembles that thing. And in this case, he does not use the words like or as to assert the resemblance. So we can say that Wordsworth provides an extended metaphorical description of the flowers in the poem. By the way, we might also use the word personification to refer to this type of description, since he is also using words which are usually used to describe an animate thing, to describe something that it's not inanimate. Flowers are animate, but at least they are non-human. So personification would be another possible term for describing this kind of description we get, unusual description of the flowers in the poem. What is the effect? And I want to encourage you to think about the effect, the purpose, the function of this tropological metaphorical description. Another commonplace, in order to get clear about possible effects, is just to remember that another commonplace of discussion of tropes throughout Western tradition is that they are the language of emotion and passion. Right? For the very earliest discussions of tropes and their functions, you get these observations according to which tropes represent, express, and arouse emotion and passion. Now, I think this basic observation is borne out by this poem. Wordsworth's metaphorical description of flowers in terms of people who are engaging in the pleasurable experience of dancing and tossing their heads in sprightly dance, that metaphorical description, I think, enhances our sense that Wordsworth was happy, gay, joyful when he saw them, and that he does indeed enjoy remembering them. The metaphorical description, I think, is an intensification, even a proof of the gaiety, bliss, and pleasure that Wordsworth says he felt and continues to feel. That Wordsworth shows his enjoyment, bliss, and happiness opens the possibility for readers to share in those feelings, as some readers of Wordsworth's poetry have claimed to do. I also find that this metaphorical description makes the flowers seem more active and alive. It enhances my sense of the motion, the life, the movement of the flowers. That is to say, it enhances and intensifies the effect of those verbs in the present tense and present participles which we observed earlier. Now there's a third, we've observed a couple similes and a metaphorical description that really traverses the entire poem. There's a third main type of tropological description, which I think is on display in the second stanza of the poem. Wordsworth writes that the flowers stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. Think about that adjective Wordsworth uses to describe the line of flowers, never-ending. That means without end, infinite. But was the line of flowers really without end? Was it really infinite? Well, the flowers may well have stretched a long way, even further than Wordsworth could see, but I doubt that they extended out into a line that was without end, that was infinite. And how many flowers did Wordsworth really see? Well, he says he saw 10,000. He says, 10,000 saw I at a glance. But were there really 10,000? I'm just guessing, but I suspect it was fewer than 10,000. Let's say it was 7,483. In that case, he would be using a word which is usually used to refer to 10,000 to refer to fewer than 10,000. So in these expressions, I think Wordsworth is using words which are usually used to refer to or mean something huge, large, vast, infinite, in order to refer to something that is not quite so huge, large, vast. He's speaking tropologically, and the particular trope on display is hyperbole. What does this hyperbolic description do? In the Rhetoric, Aristotle's wonderful account of how to persuade, he's concerned essentially with persuasion, but he also discusses poetry extensively in the Rhetoric. Aristotle says that hyperboles are often used by people who are young and in states of intense passion. His example is Achilles, this figure in the Iliad, Achilles' exaggeration to express his anger. But I think the general point that Aristotle is making is that hyperbole often functions as an expression of intense emotion and passion. And I think Wordsworth's hyperbole does this as well, where the passion, the feeling, is one of excitement, enthusiasm, and amazement at the spectacle of the flowers. How many flowers were there, William? Oh, thousands. There were 10,000. They stretched as far as the eye could see. It was infinite. Never ending. And if you get excited and enthusiastic when you are in the company of excited, enthusiastic people, then you might feel some of Wordsworth's excitement and enthusiasm when you read the second and third stanzas of the poem, where Wordsworth describes that moment of perception in the past, upon which he now reflects in pensive and vacant mood. Notice that the poem ends with more tropological description. Wordsworth uses the term wealth to describe the benefit of the experience. He uses the term flashing to describe the action of the flowers upon his mind. He uses the term inward eye to describe his mind or memory. And he says that inward eye is bliss. So the tropological description comes thick and fast. It continues in the final lines, including the final couplet in which he uses the term heart and dancing to describe the pleasure and happiness he feels when he remembers the flowers. So Wordsworth concludes the poem by using the word he uses to describe the motion of the flowers, dancing, to describe himself and his happiness when he remembers them. It turns out that both he and the flowers are like sprightly, jocund, happy people who dance. And so we get a final metaphorical description of Wordsworth. One that I think goes to show the emotion of happiness and bliss and gaiety. It goes to show, that metaphorical description shows the emotions of happiness instead of just asserting that one is happy, as would be the case if the poem concluded just with a claim like this: I feel happy when I remember the flowers. Now, tropological usage is just one of the two main ways in which our linguistic usage can be unusual. The two main ways, at least identified by the ancient rhetoricians and Renaissance literary theorists and rhetoricians. The second way in which our usage can differ is referred to as figurative usage, or figures. In the next session, we will observe this kind of usage, distinguish between different types of this usage. We'll distinguish between different figures, and we'll establish a vocabulary for describing figurative usage.